First, the main story tonight is the death and murder of 2 police officers in the High Country in Victoria. This is the second time this has happened this year. Remember the police officer who was shot and killed in Tasmania earlier in the year. The news has rocked the country after the murders took place at 10:30 this morning in Victoria's High Country.
2 police officers have been murdered in cold blood in Victoria.
2 police officers have been shot dead.
2 police officers have been killed.
Now, you know the show is pro-police, and it is pro-police in many ways because of days like this, because of the fear of days like this. More than 800 officers in our country's history have been killed while on duty. As I said, the death of a Tasmanian police officer was bad enough. We can now add 2 more names in the line of duty. The similarities between what took place in Tasmania is eerily similar to what has taken place in Victoria here, where the police were there to deliver a summons, a court summons. The officers that have been killed are a detective and a sergeant. A little more information about what took place. Again, shots being fired from the house, being approached by the police officers. 2 dead, 1 injured this morning in the High Country.
10 officers had attempted to execute a search warrant. They were ambushed. 2 officers killed in cold blood. 1 was due to retire next week. The 3rd officer shot in the thigh. He will survive as his colleagues launch a huge manhunt. The wanted gunman fleeing with his wife and children on foot. Tonight, he's holding them hostage with a firearm he took from a slain officer.
Now, as I said, this program is pro-cop because our fear is that this could happen to any officer in any region at any time. The men and women of the collective police force family are the most special people amongst us, for they run towards danger when the rest of us would run the other way. They interact multiple times every day, every week, every month, every year of their career with people in the darkest times of their lives. These people are thoroughly professional. Their strength and their courage is something that we recognise and love, and it means that the burden of what has taken place today is particularly heavy. The Chief Commissioner in Victoria gave a briefing just a couple of hours ago into a situation that is still unresolved. The person believed responsible is still on the run with hostages.
The suspect for this horrific event is still at large. We believe he is armed. We have deployed every specialist resource into this area to locate him. It is our priority.
Now, as you know, in incidents like this, I do not name and I do not show you the image of the killer. The difficulty at this moment is, of course, that the alleged killer is still amongst us and currently in bushland. Now, obviously, this is an area, the nearest town has got just 1,000 people who live in it, and the High Country is, of course, very difficult for people to search. Very difficult, of course, at night as well. We understand that thermal imaging cameras are being used to try to find the heat signals of either the alleged gunman or the people that he has taken hostage, those, of course, being members of his family. The expectation is that because of the weather and, of course, the cover of night, the ability to go on foot is very difficult. So if we know more in the next 60 minutes, of course, we'll pass it on to you. But again, the Chief Commissioner is aware that tonight is the night when the worst fear of every officer has come true, not once, but twice in a day.
We thank those courageous officers. In fact, we thank every police officer who comes to work every day to keep their communities safe.
I think the police associations in every single state and territory are special people because they are the ones who can speak on the behalf of officers. In Victoria, they are speaking on the behalf of the family of those officers that have been killed, but the wider police force family, which is not just those who wear the blue, but those who love those who wear the blue.
There's a shocking and eerie feeling of dread and indeed a sense of not knowing what to do, and that's something that's being echoed in every police station across this state right now.
We've received some comments, not just in the Parliament, but about 90 minutes ago from the Premier of Victoria, who speaks on the behalf of every decent person, not just in Victoria, but around the country.
What has occurred today in Polpunka is shocking and just so utterly heartbreaking. Policing comes with danger, and every day our police officers meet that danger with enormous courage and dedication. And this tragedy is a painful reminder of that bravery.
The police have asked that anyone who is in the high country sees or hears anything that seems out of usual, no matter how small, to please call the police. Now, you can do so by calling your local station. You can do so by calling Crime Stoppers, which is 1800 333 000, or, of course, a situation where somebody is considered armed and dangerous, 000. As soon as we know more, we will tell you more. Make sure that you make skynews.com.au your homepage for the very latest on this. Now, of course, you've heard today that Iran has been identified as the nation behind anti-Semitic attacks in Australia. These are, of course, designed to create terror, so from here on in I will refer to them as terror attacks. Thankfully, nobody died. This is what the head of ASIO said about why they believe that fires in Sydney and Melbourne have a link right back to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
ASIO now assesses the Iranian government directed at least 2 and likely more attacks on Jewish interests in Australia. Our painstaking investigation uncovered and unpicked the links between the alleged crimes and the commanders in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
Iran has sought to disguise its involvement, but ASIO assesses it was behind the attacks on the Lewis Continental Kitchen in Sydney on October 20 last year and the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne on December 6 last year.
As for the Jewish community, well, of course, it has been rocked by these events firstly taking place and then knowing that they are not the acts of hateful, localised criminals or random acts of violence. Instead, essentially, the people carrying this out, we don't know if they had any ideology or whether they just took a collection of money to carry out something on the behalf of the Islamic Republic. Their reaction tonight is important.
These attacks instigated by the Iranian regime are an attack on our nation and our sovereignty. There will be great anxiety that we have been targeted in such a callous and calculated way by a ruthless and violent foreign force because of who we are.
Can I jump on something before it begins? If not, it has already started to bolt its way out of the barn. And that is the idea that all of the significant issues that the Jewish community have been dealing with in Australia are essentially able to be either traced back, in this case, to Iran, or, as we learned previously, to be able to be traced back to overseas criminal elements. Now, that might be true for some of the most high-profile and significant, but the obvious issue here is what has been playing out person to person, not to mention the violence that has been playing out in other locations for the past couple of years that has, as best as we can understand and as best as police have always informed us, nothing to do with foreign money or people trying to game the system, as of course was the case in and around that caravan plot from just a few months ago. Now, rather than me opining more, I'm going to get an expert on in the next couple of minutes to have a look at how this works, about how often this works, and about how nervous we should be now that countries on the other side of the world can start to be organising crimes on the other side of the world, especially in this beautiful part of the world. But a bit of politics first. Of course, Parliament is back, question time in full display, and you can see the government is at its arrogant best. Now, the Liberal Party, of course, is not throwing haymakers or big bombs at the moment. Why? Because, of course, we are so close to the election just gone, not the one that will be coming up at some point into the future. But I tell you what, pretty obvious who lives rent-free in the minds of the people running this country.
Because he was in his second home at the Sky News studio. He was on Credlin being interviewed by Steve Price because not even Credlin was on Credlin last night.
I saw it on Sky News. It must be true.
Yeah, sorry, Peter's not allowed to have a holiday, is she, mate? You low life. Anyway, Claire O'Neill. Let's focus on some of her behaviour that took place today. Now, of course, Claire O'Neill is the failed Home Affairs Minister absolutely failed when it came to things like immigration, absolutely failed when it came to things like the people let out of detention and the crimes they went on to commit. The pressure was so much so that her and the useless bloke that she was with, well, they got the boot. She's now been reinvented as the housing minister. And again, she thinks now that one day her chances of becoming good performer, which is media code for a one we love, and eventually a leader, well, it's all there because she's now being rehabilitated on the number one issue for the country right now, and that, of course, is housing, both its availability and its affordability. Well, I want to take you to, before I show you some of her nonsense today, a story that was first floated, as best as I can work out, 5 days ago. Now, this was from a research organisation who, during the height of the Economic Roundtable, was suggesting that potentially land tax could be used as a way of helping people who are already living in homes where their kids have moved out to move out and move into smaller homes, because eventually it would be a price reason. Put simply, a tax on spare bedrooms. The person who was responsible for this was quoted at the time as saying that they emphasised there's nothing wrong with a home having more bedrooms than people and space for an office or for children, for visitors or for hobbies. Oh, thanks, Dale. But she wondered if there was some inefficiency in the way that the housing stock is being allocated, which might happen if those extra bedrooms were taxed. A couple of days ago, story gets reheated, this time at news.com.au. These are not obscure websites. These are all read by hundreds of thousands of people each and every day, nay, millions each and every month. Call for households with spare bedrooms to be taxed. The same person. Questions are being raised about how well the housing market is serving real demand. Same person. Suggesting that a tax could help people move into housing that fits their size. Continues, governments could make it more expensive to have more housing than you need. Now, after these stories had been swirling, at least in the online world, in, again, not obscure places, but places where the Minister's office would have been aware the word housing, and if you say housing, 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 and Claire O'Neill, Claire O'Neill, Claire O'Neill, click your heels and guess what? The transcripts will appear in her office. So there is no mystery as to whether her office was aware of the stories at all. Now, for whatever reason, there was no attempt to push back on those stories, regardless of where they came from. So because there had been effective silence on what seems like a pretty wild idea, one that I wouldn't be expecting anyone to be introducing anytime soon, to make sure that was the case, a question was asked of clueless Claire O'Neill today in Question Time. Roll the tape.
My question is to the Minister for Housing. With the government failing to deliver on its commitment to build 1.2 million new homes, new taxes on the family home were raised at the government's three-day talkfest. So will the minister rule out slugging Australians with new taxes on their spare bedrooms?
Now, Claire O'Neill's response was an 11 out of 10, and by that I mean over the top, for a story that nobody had made up, one where some sort of a research body had been quoted by both news.com.au and the Channel 9 newspapers, and many echoes of that story have existed now for the best part of a week. Yet because she, of course, is high on a hill, or dare I say high on a horse, this was the response.
I don't know what bizarre fantasy land those opposite have been living in. What on earth are they talking about? Now, I've heard that these questions are getting asked over in the other place today, and I thought, God, the housing minister, the shadow housing minister's, hasn't had his wheat bix for breakfast this morning. I mean, I don't know what he's going on about, but the fact that we've got people in the House of Representatives asking ridiculous questions like this, get a clue, guys. So,
of course, all part of the overall campaign where the adults in charge, these are the people that don't know how to fire a shot, these are the people that were heavily rejected at the last election, so who cares? But again, the story was out and about. She either didn't know the story, maybe, but you would imagine that if you're the housing minister, you're across many a story and an idea, you would imagine that your office is across the idea. But guess what? It's not just the websites that have been talking about this very story. Now, again, if the sources of the information are ones that this Member of Parliament does not want to pay attention to, you think anything that would have come out of the mouth of an ABC radio host in Melbourne, it might have hit the mark as an issue that you'd like to either kill before it grows or respond to. But again, third media organisation talking about it. This one, the ABC.
Eliza, there's a furious response to the idea. What do you make of that anger?
Oh, I totally get it. I mean, there's so many reasons that you'd want to have more bedrooms, work from home, amenity, guests, babysitting, which I know a lot of grandparents do. And not just that, but if you implement yet another tax on people just for living in their homes, that's politically much less popular than just taxing the smaller portion of people that are transacting every year.
So, The Age, in terms of Melbourne, and that's where the minister lives, The Age, news.com.au, the ABC. Oh, yeah, and Channel 7 talked about it too.
Well, a mismatch between the average size of households and the average size of a home is prompting experts to propose a tax on spare bedrooms. New research from Cotality revealed a third of Australian households is made up of just 2 people, while the most common property is 3 bedrooms. It suggested that a levy, along with the removal of stamp duty, may encourage shrinking families and empty nesters to downsize, freeing up supply.
There's a reason why nicknames stick, and clueless Claire O'Neill would stick in terms of this case, that either she was completely unaware of multiple news services over multiple days talking about an idea that if she has no plans to introduce it, she could knock on the head from day one. But instead, of course, she's peacocking down there in Canberra because they're the team that'll win forever, which means we get yet another reminder that perhaps it'll be arrogance. Perhaps it will be the peacocking of the Labor Party that will end up doing more damage to the Labor Party than anyone else in the next few years. And they're going to do damage if they keep carrying on like this. Now, as we know, the Australian economy is amazing. Why? Because we've got the Prime Minister, the snake charmer and Toto in charge of the way the world is working. And because he's wearing sneakers like the cool kids, whew, this ain't a dude in his 60s. But also, I talk often about the triangle of dependence. This is where the economy that is being built by those people, not the puppy, those guys, is going to be very similar to the one that Labor has built in Victoria. The triangle of dependence, as I've spoken 150 times before, and I'll get on to another 150 until you know it off by heart like me, is that they want the majority of people to either be receiving welfare from the state, working for the state, or if you're in business, for the biggest customer to be the state. And because nobody will rock the boat, then they end up with a permanent majority. Sure, the deficit goes from 1 trillion to 2, but who cares? It's just about winning the next election. Well, today, we got some numbers from the Australian Bureau of Statistics about the number of businesses that exist in Australia. Latest count, 2.7 million businesses exist in Australia. Now, whether that's ABNs, whether that's things that are defined as a company, I'm not too sure, but 2.7 million businesses in Australia. About 1 million of those businesses actually employ someone. There, of course, being the extreme bulk of businesses in Australia are sole traders. And we often talk about sole trading and how often this government couldn't give two buggers about it. Why? Because if you're a sole trader, you don't fit into the triangle of dependence. But also what was fascinating to see here is about the number of businesses that were started in the financial year of 2024 to 2025. 437,000 were created, but 370,500 had closed. Now, whether that was of the 437,000 created that year, or whether that was just 370,000 fewer businesses than the many years before, you still see the vast majority of businesses that are created don't make it all the way through its first year. But the reason we get back to the triangle of dependence is if I show you where the greatest growth in businesses has been, you will notice they are ones that have a connection to government. On the left-hand side, the blue there suggests that the businesses that are going backwards in terms of the number of are retail, trade, or agriculture, forestry and fisheries. The longest line, heading off to the right, almost running off the screen, would be healthcare and social assistance. Therefore, the biggest client of the biggest amount of businesses created in the past 12 months, the government. That's why we call it the triangle of dependence. Because right now, 50% of all Australians' main source of income is the government when we're talking about welfare. Hundreds of thousands of people are there when it comes to employment, and clearly the biggest client in town is the government, particularly when it comes to the healthcare sector. Nothing to see here, just a completely open free market that slowly but surely is becoming loyal exclusively to the government. A government that, yes, is handsomely in power by 94 seats, but one that will only strengthen that triangle until, just like in Victoria, no matter how bad things get, the majority of the population will not rock the boat because the boat is the one that's keeping them alive. Double metaphors there, but the triangle of dependence is worth talking about. All right, let's go back to our main conversation this evening, which is this conversation about Iran. And Iran, through essentially, let's imagine a chain here where there's money in Iran, goes to somebody, goes to somebody, goes to somebody who hires local crooks in Australia to carry out crime on its behalf. Those crimes were Jewish facilities, both a synagogue and a business, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney. Greg Barton is with Deakin University. He is the Global Islamic Politics Chair and he joins us now. He's a regular guest here on Sky News. Lovely to see you, sir. Now, Greg, we have obviously heard of a long time about how Iran is a proxy state, that in many ways it has sponsored terrorism around the world. And of course, there's not always that direct link between the bank accounts of the Islamic Guard and the soldiers on the battlefield. Now, we are not talking about a battlefield right now, but the way you get to a battlefield begins with proxy attacks like what is happening here. What's your reaction to the news of the day?
Yeah, if those who are paying attention, Paul, it's not surprising, although it's pretty significant for a government to come out and make the decision it's made, and credit to it for taking a bold decision. Iran has traditionally run on proxy powers. We think of groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, both very much diminished now, thankfully. But it also uses disinformation, information campaigns, and does that by various means. What we're seeing with the accusations now, with evidence provided, is that Iran was behind at least two major incidents over the last 12 months. Once an attack on a restaurant, a firebombing, and a firebombing of a synagogue in Melbourne, both of which could have led to fatalities, thankfully didn't. And they were done via cutouts, as Mike Burgess, head of ASIO, says. In other words, going through people who probably didn't know who was paying the bill, but offered to do took up the offer to do a criminal act for payment, not because of a conviction, just simply a profit motive, making it hard to track it back to the people providing the money, which was the Revolutionary Guards Corps, the element of the military that's behind the regime that's really the top dog in Iran. This has happened elsewhere around the world, and we'll probably hear more stories of similar things happening, but it's a pretty significant situation in Australia to have it laid out so clearly.
Yeah, it's this thing where, at the very end of the chain, it's a fistful of dollars and losers who have no ideological view, who may well be the person who literally throws something, bash something, or worse. But again, there are more dollars and everyone's skimming off the top as it moves its way through the system. But obviously, Iran has had an eye on Australia for a long time, all right? It is often referred to as one of principally three countries that are involved in cyber espionage that has been focused on Australia. So the idea that, as you say, people who haven't been paying attention might be slightly shocked, but Australia has been on Iran's list for a little while here.
It certainly has. I mean, we're not exclusive members of this list, but we are a significant middle power country. We're a member of the Five Eyes alliance with Canada and the UK, America and New Zealand. We in many respects, stand out because of our location on the planet, because of a multicultural society, because we speak up on issues of concern. And Iran wants to mess with our politics. It wants to sow dissent and doubt about our political processes and offices, but it just basically wants to distract. So when you ask yourself the question, what would the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps set to gain from trouble in Australia? It's really about playing to a domestic base in Iran and making themselves look like victims, but also strongly in charge of what's happening. They're doing this not just in Australia. We have many cases of Iranian operations in the UK and Canada and America, often targeting kidnapping and assassination. Thankfully, we're not talking about here, but we are on the global stage, whether we like it or not. And this is the sort of dark side of that reality.
It doesn't get bigger, short of, well, it always can get bigger, but it is a particularly significant step for a country to say, that's it, get your representatives out of the country, where you're essentially sort of severing the ability to have a conversation with you. The other side of that is, do you have any concern? Because during the most recent conflict between Iran and Israel, Australia was trying to airlift Iranian Australians and Israeli Australians back here, and it was almost like a 3 or 4 to 1 of the number of people that needed to get out of the region that were coming from Iran. Obviously, if we've pulled out of there and they've been booted out of here, are there real-life people who get stuck in what are the necessary severing of relations because of things like this, and that is something that should be of concern to people who are planning to travel in either direction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Paul. There's a couple of points to watch. One is the government has said it's stopping the normal diplomatic relations, but not severing communications completely. Now, how it'll do this when it declares that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps is a terrorist group, following in the footsteps of Canada doing this last year and America doing it in 2019. It's not easy once you've declared a group to be a terrorist group. That limits your ability to communicate with them. But there are other elements in the Iranian governmental regime apparatus that are not literally connected to the Guards Corps. So perhaps that's the back channel. But it does make it much harder for the Australian government to help Australian dual nationals or other Australians who might be travelling through the region. So the advice is don't travel to Iran. If you're in Iran, leave Iran. It's hard to help Australians in Iran anyway. It's going to be harder now. But that's, this risk assessment was made on the basis that it's better to take action against the IRGC now than to live with the risk of having to operate at embassies and consulates. But none of this is easy.
Greg Barton, thank you so much for the chat. I really appreciate it.